These are the top 5 industries that pay over $100,000 if you work in project management. As a disclaimer, all the data that I'm pulling is from the United States using websites like Glassdoor and Indeed.com, and also from talking to other people and also doing my own personal research online. With that said, as we dive into the salary expectations, please note that your salary is heavily dependent upon your certifications, your educational degree, your background, your years of experience, the university or the college that you go to, and a slew of other factors. With that said, let's dive into this. The very first industry that pays over 6 figures for project managers is energy and utilities. In this industry, a project manager usually leads large capital infrastructure and energy projects. Because these are very large-scale projects, you're usually going to be leading big cross-functional multidisciplinary teams like engineering, testing, procurement, supply chain, construction, and the list goes on. If you're interested in this kind of industry, the few companies that are applicable here are SoCal Edison, if you live in California, Chevron, General Electric, and ExxonMobil, just as an example. Now, a true story, SoCal Edison is very competitive to get into. I've applied to that company for years and I still haven't even gotten in, but it's very competitive. I've heard stories of people who knew someone on the inside through a family member, but it's still really competitive to get into. You might have to take a test, then have several interviews before you even have a chance at actually getting the job itself. So I did want to give you that disclaimer ahead of time if you think it's really easy to get into SoCal Edison, just as an example. But like with any company, the job market is extremely competitive and you have to do everything you can to balance the odds in your favor by getting your college degree, pursuing certifications, or gaining more experience in your field so you can qualify for these types of roles. Now, the areas, if you're a project manager for this industry, revolve around oil and gas, wind and solar energy, electrical utilities, and of course, pipeline. And I've written down here a few projects that you might see in this field. So for example, building out a solar or wind farm, rolling out EV charging stations, decommissioning a power plant, or even modernizing the grid with smart meters. These are just examples of typical projects that you might lead as a project manager if you're working in electrical or energy and utilities. And remember, these projects are not just a 5-month kind of thing. Usually these are multi-year projects because they involve millions and millions of dollars in budget. And in terms of estimated salary, when I did my research, these kinds of companies pay very handsomely well. So we're talking at least 6 figures, anywhere from $130,000, much past that. So $140,000, $150,000, maybe even $160,000 for a project management job. The second industry is for the tech industry. So anything related to IT, information technology, and software. If you're a project manager in this space, you're going to be heavily focused on either developing software, web-based applications, or even deploying and delivering the software to different locations in the business or face-to-face with your customers. So development and delivery of software-based products. And anything that's software heavy means that you're going to be working with a large group of cross-functional teams like engineering, software development, test engineering, UX, QA, or quality assurance, testing, regulatory, product design, marketing, and so on. There are many, many tech companies out there. You can go from startup to midsize to Fortune 50, Fortune 100, or even Fortune 500 companies. The larger you go, it just means that it's a lot more competitive to get into. So like Google, Meta, Facebook, Microsoft, Salesforce, IBM, even Atlassian, all these big companies have tech roles or project management positions. One of the most popular ones is for program managers. These are very popular, and oftentimes many of these tech positions do offer remote jobs. But I do want to tell you that getting into these kind of roles is competitive because you need a specific educational background and some experience either in IT, having some kind of understanding in software development, like the software development lifecycle, programming languages, the list just goes on and on. But if you do have a degree in software development or programming or information technology, I would encourage you, of course, to apply to these kinds of industries because they pay very, very well. At Microsoft, you could easily make $200K plus as a technical program manager. But in general, salaries that I found online for this industry, for the tech space, is anything from $120,000 to $150,000 plus, even crossing the boundaries of $200,000. Again, it all depends on which company that you decide to apply for. So as real product examples, you could be implementing cloud migrations. So going from on-premise to AWS, or even ERP implementation. So Oracle or SAP adoption. So these are just examples, but as you can tell, because it's very software-based, you need to have a very strong background in the Agile framework and how to deliver software-based technologies across different teams. The third industry is for the aerospace industry. This industry is very heavily regulated. There's a lot of regulatory standards. And so a project manager in this space typically manages engineering programs to build out aircraft, satellite systems, and defense technology. And just like the other roles that we talked about, you're leading cross-functional, multidisciplinary teams of engineers, software developers, maybe electrical or mechanical engineers, manufacturing, operations, quality assurance, and of course, regulatory. And you might even be working with procurement or supply chain to oversee very complex government contracts. And you're always thinking about how can you improve the safety, the quality, and the reliability of the performance. So just as an example, some of these companies are very large. So we're talking about Boeing, Lockheed Martin, Northrop Grumman, even SpaceX by Elon Musk. Some examples of projects that you might be involved with if you're in the aerospace field are developing a new aircraft system, launching a new satellite, upgrading different components of a military system like radar technology, transferring manufacturing operations from one plant facility to another facility in a different state, or even internationally to another country. And of course, research and development for new products that need to be launched to the government. And salaries here, again, very well paying, easily $140,000 to maybe even closer to $200,000, depends on what company and where you're located. But very handsomely, well above six figures if you're interested in aerospace. To get in, I highly encourage you to use your network, or even just to make sure that you get the experience in the technical field to qualify for these types of roles. By the way, if you're interested in landing your next job in project management, I do have a free gift for you. I want to help you land your next job as a project manager, and you can download my free project manager resume template over at alvinthepm.com/resume template. This has the exact framework and the bullet point strategy that I used to land multiple six-figure jobs as a project manager. So go ahead, download your free resume template over at alvinthepm.com/resume template. Now our next industry is for financial services and banking. If you've used a credit card before, if you've taken out a loan, or if you've gone to a bank to do deposits into your online checking account or your savings account, then you know what corresponds to financial services and banking. We all have done it. But did you know that there are actually project manager roles inside of these companies? The answer is yes. So some examples of companies that hire project managers in this space are JP Morgan Chase, Bank of America, Capital One, and the list goes on. And so if you're a PM in this industry, you're going to be overseeing tech or digital implementations, managing different vendors, and making sure that we're complying with the different regulations in the financial industry. And it's very technology heavy based. So you're going to be leading cross-functional teams across IT, risk, compliance, business, and operations. So it's kind of similar to an IT project manager, but across similar but a little bit different kinds of teams. You're going to be heavily responsible for data governance and security, and also driving change in a very heavily regulated space to meet the most stringent regulatory and audit standards. So just like our other industries, this one is extremely regulated. Some examples of projects that you might lead as a project manager in the finance industry could be streamlining payment processing systems, overseeing regulatory compliance initiatives, modernizing the banking system, or even developing and managing programs that involve the data warehouse and the analytics. So because it's in finance, they also do pay pretty well, at least $120,000 and above, depending on which banking company that you apply for. And for our last company that pays above six figures in project management is for the pharmaceuticals and the biotechnology company. Now you might be wondering, how is this different from all the other companies? Well, you'll slowly start to see a trend where they develop different similar kinds of programs that are either related to operations, business development, or new product development. So in this case, a project manager usually is involved with overseeing research and development of new clinical drugs. Maybe they're involved with overseeing clinical trials, regulatory submissions, or new product development of drugs. So think of this as, like developing the next Tylenol or developing a new medical device that can help someone during surgery. And so there are PMs involved in new product development, operations, business, even in manufacturing operations. It all depends on what kind of project manager job that you decide to apply to. And just like with the other industries, you're coordinating heavily across different cross-functional, multidisciplinary teams like engineering, operations, quality assurance, regulatory affairs, marketing, even contract research organizations. So just to give you an idea here, a few examples include execution of a large phase 3 clinical trial, the commercial launch of a new drug like Tylenol, scaling up manufacturing operations for a drug, right? There's so many different plants that possibly need to ramp up and build this new drug to meet the revenue demand for the company. That's what's involved here. Or even validating a new equipment that can be used to manufacture that specific product or that drug, right? Maybe they did prototype testing using one machine, but now they need to validate a whole different machine to scale up production so it can be fully automated. That's another example on how you could manage projects in the biotech or pharmaceutical industry. These companies are very massive. They're very large, and some of them are in the Fortune 100 list. So for example, Johnson & Johnson, Pfizer, Amgen, Gilead Sciences, the list goes on, but any household products that you probably use on a day-to-day basis or when you're going shopping to the CVS market, you've probably seen these companies because you've seen the drugs on the shelf, right? Like Tylenol, aspirin, Advil, so on, right? So Johnson & Johnson, Pfizer, Amgen, Gilead Sciences, any of those big pharmaceutical company names. And again, just like our other industries, project managers in the biotech or the pharmaceutical space pay very well above a six-figure salary. So we're talking $130,000, maybe even closer to $200,000, depending upon the seniority of your position. So if you're entry level, maybe closer to 120K, maybe 110K. But as you get closer to program manager or senior program manager, you're talking possibly $180,000 or even $200,000 and above. So with these industries that we've covered, which industry do you want to work for in your career, and which one are you currently working in right now? Let me know your thoughts by dropping me a comment in the comment section down below. Now, to learn how to break into project management this year so you can start earning closer to six figures and beyond, please watch this video next, and I'll see you in the next video.